Hello, everybody. This is Pat Cook with the Colorado Gerontological Society, and this is part 2 of the HCBS Final Rules FAQ 2, and the catch-up work that we wanted to put on our YouTube web channel to help everybody put their arms back around the HCBS Final Rules. Because again, we put them on the shelf during COVID and did as little as we could get away with. And now we got to use this short window that we have before the end of summer and be totally caught up. So I will be recording Monday, the last series of this, and then so all 3 will be available on our YouTube channel, or you can call me and talk to me about any areas that you don't feel like you understand or you need more additional assistance with. So let's get started. So from 15 to 17, a lot of work happened in the disabled market. And one of the things they kept saying is don't do anything without us. And I borrowed that, don't do anything without seniors, we have to take care of everybody. So it's we Colorado. And I started that model and that push that it's we Colorado. And a couple of other agencies have taken that and added a word or two. So, it's catching on, but that's an important factor in our industry is that we serve everybody. And so the Olmstead Act opened those doors in a lot of ways. So Senator Olmstead's had a disabled child. And because of what they went through as a family and what she went through as an adult, he was able to push through the Olmstead Act, which changed the course of how our federal government treated disabled people, either childhood disabilities or acquired disabilities. And one of the things that happened many, many years ago was the whole conceptual framework of waivers. And so in 17, Colorado renewed their contracts for the elderly, blind, and disabled waiver and the mentally ill waiver, and gave us some time to continue to work on them and then make amendments as we go. And we have done that. So we're very strong in HCBS, and many states come to Colorado to see how we did it and what we're doing now. But we have other states that are doing better than us. And so I look at them to see what they're doing so that we can carry the conversation forward with people that are decision makers and legislators, because most of my experience, legislators have minimal knowledge and get led on a goose chase or on false information and then hold on to it for dear life, and don't really take the time to crosswalk it and make sure that what they think they know is actually true and reliable. So way back in the day, we had adult care facilities. These were group homes, another term for them, usually small group homes. And then we got some bigger ones because we had a lot of homeless men mostly, and some women. And we had bigger group homes to serve the needs of these folks that were unsuccessful at maintaining independence in the community. And then they were morphed in and they were married into the assisted living world. And so now we have assisted livings that also have a contract with the state as an adult care facility or adult care community. And they hold an additional license and a whole lot of responsibilities in addition to the assisted living regulations of Chapter 2 and Chapter 7 over at CRS 6. So in crosswalking, that's a methodology that we have to get a lot better at, all of us, in making sure that we understand what we know, what's available and what's true, and what is can be interpreted by a very vague statement, and then people put their own spin on it. Crosswalking is a quality measure. And one of the tools that I like to use in crosswalking is to do a SWOT analysis. And SWOT analysis are very useful in many, many areas of business and many areas of service delivery. So you like to look at things like, what's your strengths? What do you do really well? What's some of the threats that are getting in your way of being successful or taking down your success? What are some of the opportunities coming in the future? And then what is the industry or what is the organizational weaknesses? And you want to get rid of as many weaknesses and many threats as you can and move them up and stabilize them and move them up into either new opportunities or a subgroup of strengths, things that you're working on called a work in process or a WIP. or a QAPI, which is another tool that I like to use to look at how an organization can build upon their base and improve their delivery. So let's look at some common topics and some language so make sure that you understand things. So we have what we call community integration. And that means, again, it's we Colorado. So for many years, people that had an intellectual disorder, and some of them extremely impaired, some stayed in their home with their families, but others, the families couldn't do it or didn't want to do it. And they were put into communities like Wheat Ridge Regional Center. And those were abolished because, again, it was isolation and not giving any value or any purpose to folks that might have been able to participate at a higher level than they did in living in a regional center. And so those disappeared, and then host homes became more prominent, and then families got more supports. And so we were able to start integrating or bringing people together that would be able to use the community or any of the services within the community equitably. And you're going to hear a lot of equity in the next year or two because it's a big buzzword and a big topic. And so the other thing that we had to do is we had to develop our professional market. So like the people that had to deal with disorders, we had people that served those same folks and was very protective of them. And so back in starting in 16, moving forward, we started integrating our professional world so that there was more opportunities for people to have more choice and to have changing conversations about what was or what was not possible. Autonomy means if you want to be independent or you wanted to have an independent methodology of handling your life, you could, or you could join groups that were more like-minded. So it gave you more rights and more freedoms. Transportation changed a lot, and it's really changed a lot in the last 2 years. And so host homes and centers, nursing homes, all that, they had their own transportation. And then as we developed in the assisted living world, people started using cars and transporting, but then they get in an accident or something really bad would happen and they did not have the correct insurance. Because when you have a business, you cannot use regular car insurance. You have to have commercial insurance. And so lawsuits started really growing about the same period of time. Then the second issue we had is the feds and the states wanted the communities to have one parking space for every resident in the community. Well, that wasn't possible in residential, where we were trying to integrate and letting people live within a residential area. You couldn't have that many cars. And then the HOAs used that as a weapon and to drive out the adult care facilities and the ALRs out of their communities because they didn't want all that traffic or cars. So about that time, I got involved in several cases in fair housing and civil rights. We won all our cases, but it was a real it was a real eye-opening experience where I got to figure out how different agencies when they have a collective action can be very effective and bring across change. And transportation happened to be that catalyst of where I started learning that. Then we also have had another trend for many, many years of representative payee. So the old adage that if somebody got money in their pocket, it would just burn until they spent it all, but it didn't mean that they took care of things they needed to. So Social Security saw a lot of fraud going on in this area, and we saw other areas where we needed a term called representative payee. So people, some really good-hearted people were helping those who were disabled with their funding. And then we had some fraud start up and really take hold. And then we had a lot of fraud at banks. And so the rep payee process really changed in this time. And we began to see programs called fiduciaries. So these are folks that are vetted. They have background checks. They have to have perfect credit, and they have to have liability and some other types of insurance for their services to protect the folks that use them. And this representative payee all of a sudden became a thing that group homes and assisted living started doing for residents. And then the resident move out, and then the resident would be caught in the issue that the rep payee had controlled their money instead of them. So a lot of rule changes started happening, and now it's very tight. So I have cited the rule for you. My recommendation is never be a rep payee for an assisted living or an adult care facility. It gets you in the middle, and you can be accused of fraud when you're not even, you have no intent to fraud. But if that resident moves out, you have to go through a whole major process of disenrolling yourself from being the rep payee. The next big thing that came on was egress cameras and keys. So egress is a fire and safety term to make sure that people can leave a premise equitably and that they're safe and they can do it in a timely manner. And each building has its own threshold of how fast it'll burn or not burn. And so the fire departments got better at their evaluations. They got better at helping facilities understand their fire safety needs. And then we are really better at our new builds, and they have fire doors, they have fire walls, they have insulation that's fireproof. And so the newer communities are a lot safer in the fire world, but you still have to have egress. So in some of the work that I've done over the last 5 years, learned how to do egress in things like gates, how to put a bar to go, or how to turn off the electric to protect an egress, and then the bar works, things of that nature. The other thing that we went through is people started putting security cameras all over their house, and those were outlawed rapidly in violation of privacy and resident rights. So the only camera you can have a ring camera in the front door, back door, garage area, because that's a community norm, and we won on that when we fought back. And you can have a camera on your med card, and it should be attached to your administrator access only. It's not for everybody to hack or get into. And we had to put cameras on med cards again because it's very hard to hire staff, even with all the background checks we're doing, and not have somebody, just on the fly decide that they're going to take medications, or they're going to divert controlled drugs to their own use. And unfortunately, that has been a big thorn in our industry for a while. Then the other thing is residents' rooms, or their units, as I am changing this to, is they should have a key just like you do to your apartment, your house. And so they have a key to their door, and they need to have a locked cabinet in their room to put their valuables. Now, whether they put them in there or not is, not always the same. And we had to do some training. And whether they lock their room or not is also up to them, but they have the right to have those keys and that security. If you do punch codes, the residents have to be able to use them. We have a couple of memory care facilities using punch codes. The residents are not in memory care, they're in early memory care, and therefore they got cited as a violation of resident rights. So it's very important that you pay attention to this, because I can guarantee you that the different entities that are coming in your house are paying heavy attention to it. And that includes fire and safety folks when they come and do your annual certificate of occupancy and fire panel and fire alarms. The next conceptual framework that I want to review is privacy, dignity, and freedom. So privacy, you don't have the right to walk into a person's room without knocking. You don't have the right to invade their privacy when they've asked to, not be invaded. And it puts us into jeopardy as well, because we've had issues where both men and women have been sexually assaulted. We've had issues with people bringing in marijuana. We had a recent issue where a guy went and bought meth for the whole community and got everybody, compromised on a weekend day, and then the whole weekend turned into a disaster. And so dealing with that was no fun for the owners, for the girl that was working, and for the residents that thought they were just eating some candy, because I'm not exactly sure how they got talked into it. Doubt if I'll ever understand that. So, but we do have to do privacy, and we're not their parents. We also have to teach our staff more conversation techniques and hospitality techniques and motivational interviewing techniques. We're getting better. I think the people that run memory cares are better at it than anybody because they've been using methodologies that come from trainers like Tiva Snow and the Pioneer Network and others. They've been teaching motivational interviewing for some time. We also got put into doing Q2-hour night checks. And again, this came from a couple of residents that got themselves entangled in a situation in their room and died. One died of asphyxiation, another one died of a fracture and was not found for hours and was, and the night checks weren't done. So then, the residents pushed back and said, I don't want to be bothered at night. And so we came to an agreement that we can do a release for those that are safe and who are not at risk to release themselves for night checks until the situation changes. And then we may have to even do more than Q2 hours. Okay. Another great big huge conversation has been the common areas, whether they're indoors or outdoors. So you can't turn the TV off at 10. You can't tell people that they can't use the common areas. You cannot dictate that they can't have a visitor in the common area, except when we had sustainable high COVID, when we are really limiting our visitors in the house. You guys are probably aware that some legislation went through to improve visitation during pandemic periods. And so this should be very interesting because one of the reasons that we didn't have the death rate of New York is because we actually did the right thing to take care of our people on the COVID side. And yet we created unintended consequences for staff and for the residents of isolation and deprivation of their families and their loved ones while we were trying to figure out how we were going to cope with this very changing virus that had a mind of its own. The other thing that we also have to make sure that our residents understand this is a rental agreement. It's covered under statute. I recommend highly that you use the Colorado statute for your rent agreement and then a separate service agreement. It will save you a lot of grief. But one of the things that's built into the statute and into the Colorado form is that the destruction of property, theft, or commit a personal crime, and that gives it's a landlord-tenant protection. And so that again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can use what the state has for you, and you can defend your community and your property when somebody violates it. And unfortunately, that does happen. Rules and house rights, or house rules and resident rights. So in Chapter 7, there is 5 banks of rules. Do not use anything other than that. I have a pretty form. If you want the pretty form, all you got to do is get a hold of me. I'm glad to give it to you. And on house rules, I've kept it very minimal as much as possible, because the bottom line of a house rule is that the rule has to be the same for everybody in the house. I've seen facilities have 30 pages of house rules, and they go right in the trash can. So house rules, 5 to 6 house rules at the most. And I want you to think about your own family. So you have unspoken house rules, and you may have some written house rules in your particular family, but the majority of them are agreed behaviors. So like in my house, I don't like people wearing their shoes from outside to inside my house. So, they take their shoes off, it goes in the shoe holder, and there is a slipper box, and they're glad to grab slippers if they don't want to go barefooted. So it's that type of stuff that we have to do, but more and more. And we got more work to do with house rules. But the house rule that's important to me is that we treat everybody with dignity and respect. And that is all, staff to residents, residents to staff. And so that house rule is what I normally put in the very first house rule, and it's for everybody. The other thing that we went through huge was the private room discussion. This is still a national discussion. The very progressive young people do not understand the business side of any of this nationally, and they think everybody should have a private room. Sometimes that can work, and some facilities can do that, but that's not the norm. If we're going to make it financially in the state and federal reimbursement structures, we cannot do private rooms that easily. Some of the new builds have worked out some cool things where they've done little tiny suites that are about 350 square feet, and then they have a Jack and Jill bathroom, and then they share it with another little suite, and that seems to be working well in these new builds. But in a lot of my older facilities, we did dormitory style institutions back in the day, and to get those all remodeled and get that all caught up to meet the new standards of 2022 is not easy. It's very expensive, especially with the increased cost of any remodeling. And so I work with some facilities on this, and so it's not easy. It is a journey to go through. All right, one of the big ones is that in FAQ2 is that roommates can choose each other, and they can also change with each other. So we need to make that happen. And then if we are creating a change, then we have to give 30-day notice unless it's an emergency. And so you be very careful, use your ombudsman if you have to do a change, and get their input and help. And a lot of times it's how you present it. And if you say, I know you guys are really struggling to get along, and is there two others of you that you guys could change roommates and see if that would work better? And I've done that in some facilities. We did it quietly, and we did the moves quietly, and we didn't have any pushback. But again, it can be very uncomfortable. So one of the things that going back in 2017 is they wanted all the empty rooms for the roommates to be part of the interview process to see if they would like them as a roommate. And we went through immediately where I don't like anybody. I don't like this. I don't like that. I don't want that person. And so that wasn't working financially. So we're still struggling through this. This will continue to be some more of the conversation. The other thing is that residents have access to food at any time. So this was also extremely controversial. And we had problems where you put out snacks and one resident would steal the whole basket of snacks, or hide the whole snacks for and so we had to come to some agreements how to handle some of the behaviors with that. Then COVID hit the door, and we couldn't feed people in the dining room because we didn't have enough room for the social distancing of 6 feet per resident. And so we did open our dining room up to more hours, and then some of our residents were able to eat in their rooms, and we made it through this. And then when we have a breakout, we have to go back to residents eating in their rooms, and it's very isolated. Food is probably the most common social determinant in our industry. And people, some of them have not, prior to coming to your house, may have not eaten socially in many, many years, and they have to learn that skill again. And so as we continue in this future thinking, we're going to have to get better and better and better at our food delivery and better at our food services. And so remember that you cannot dictate a time. You can have a time zone. And so you can, dining room opens at 5 to 7, or breakfast is from 7 to 9, that type of thing. What I've noticed though, like all social animals, even in my larger facilities, we have the time zone, but the majority of the people show up at the same time every day. And that's their routine that's comfortable to them. So, humans dictate a lot. And so we have some, people that have a voice and they want it different. And we have others that prefer to stay with that social entity or that social norm, and will continue to be pretty consistent now. So I listed all the things that came out at that period in FAQ2, so you would have it on one slide. And I'd like you to please take some time and make sure you've got all these questions answered, because there will be a time in the very near future where the department will be focused on this again, and we'll come in to see how, and they will be answering these exact questions in their survey process, because these were dictated down from the feds to the state. So if you can answer them and you have the answers, then you'll be able to go through this part of the survey without stumbling around. All right, so communication. Communication has changed a lot in the last 2 years. So reminder, you still have to have a landline or a voice over computer line that residents can use as a house phone. And it's not your business phone, it is the resident's phone. The residents who have cell phones should have privacy in the use of them. And so again, you cannot use their cell phones for your business or make a call. That's their own private telephone. Mail should be private, and even though they're getting state forms, set the stage saying, it looks like you got a letter from Colorado. Can we look at this together so I can help you understand what this letter might mean? And that seems to work really well. And then any visitors, if they want to have privacy, they can. And this becomes a challenge sometimes in shared rooms for privacy. And so you may want to have a sector of your house that people could go to or outside, and they can, in a sheltered, covered area, and they can have a conversation or a discussion if they wish to in privacy. Okay. All right, so some supports that we need to regroup and figure out how to cope with. One of them is cooking. Cooking for some people is very important, and some of them just like to bake. I know baking was huge for years, and so consider bringing your baking programs back in. Make sure you have ADA accommodations for those that need it. So grab bars in the shower, grab bars at the toilets, appropriate height items so that people are accommodated, because anybody that lives in your facility, you should consider that they have a disability of some sort to be there. And so that you may need to make an accommodation for them to meet their needs. One of the other ones is laundry. So in the federal regulations, it says that laundry has to be front loaders and accessible to residents to do their own laundry if they wish. You may need to support them so they don't break the equipment or put too much soap in. And you do have a rule in the chemical side, the Chapter 7, that all chemicals must be locked up, and that includes laundry soap. So we're in a little bit of a gray zone because residents shouldn't have to ask for laundry soap, and figuring out where maybe they can keep their pods in their room, in their locked cabinet, they can take their own down, or how they get the community pods. We still have more work in this area. I see some opportunity, I see some challenges. And then we have to make sure we have enough space. So remember that if you have 14 residents, you have to have 14 plus one visitor. So that's 28 outdoor seating areas at any time. So it's not 7 where they share. You must have enough room for everybody, for one per resident and one visitor minimal. And you want to have some outdoor space where a family can come and have a picnic together, or have a birthday party together, or have tea together, whatever they want to do. This really was tough during early COVID. If you remember right, we were putting those plexiglass barriers up in hopes that we would keep the virus from floating in the air and impacting other people. And it probably helped some, but I don't think it was particularly the most successful thing we've ever done, because some of the viruses, especially in Delta and Omicron, have a longer lifespan than what we thought originally, and others die off very quickly when they hit CO2 in the air. So like I said, we got a long ways to go to understand how to handle another major outbreak if we have another pandemic in the ventilation and the outdoor spaces. All right, so another thing that was in the FAQ2s was person-centered planning. And so this is important. This is what you need to be working on as your QAPI for 22-23, is making sure that your service plan meets the needs and built on these factors. So what are their preferences? What is the pre-assessments prior to moving in, first 30-day assessments, what do those tell you? And then adjustment assessments, such as they have a fall, you need to do a new fall assessment. I like to use one called Steady Fast. Or if their capabilities change, increase or decrease. I've had some really impaired memory care people be incredible in puzzles, blew me out of the water. And I've had some very high functioning, what we thought were high functioning folks, and not be able to do anything that was linear, or needed to have steps. So again, every person needs to be assessed for activities, capability, safety, and then preferences. You also need to look at ability. or availability, I mean, in the community, or availability of hiring somebody that can bring some of these talents. And so what I've been telling industries that I talk to, go looking in the hotel industries, instead of laying off more people, and they are not able to get all of their services back up. And we may be able to recruit some of these hospitality trained folks into our industry, and we will have a major, major coup if we can do that. And then what is going on in your community? Volunteers, there's very specific in the RCF about volunteerism and how you vet them and how that works. We still can't bring community animals in, though there is no proof in the pudding anywhere that I can see that an animal is going to bring COVID into your facility. The animal might catch COVID from your facility, but I have not seen evidence that service animals and service horses and llamas and those types of things are a risk to our communities. I sure know that they were great for mental health. So I'm hoping the RCF will lighten up on that in the very near future. All right, so let's say you have a resident that's acting up and you're like, what am I going to do about this? And, I'm just going to just give them a discharge and they need to leave. Well, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. So in the very, very, very near future, I imagine emergency rules will be in no later than September at the state level and no later than fall in the at CDPHE level, that on rights modifications will be stricter, and how you ask somebody to leave your facility will definitely be stricter. So that's Senate Bill 22-154 if you want to go look at it. And again, we were very engaged in that conversation. There was language in there that really upset me to no end. And so what we learned from that though, is that we have to do a better job on assessments. We have to put together the right community, and we're not filling a bed, but we're building a community. Very hard for people that use this industry for investment, and they're not people, they just want the investment in their dollars. And so getting that balance is going to be tough. But you're not parents, and you cannot do rights modifications. You do not have authority in your licensure under Chapter 2 to be a lawyer or a court. And yet residents are still responsible for their social and legal behaviors. So just a reminder, house rules are for everyone. You cannot violate any federal civil rights, and you got to be very careful that your house rules are reflective of the industry. One of the house rules that you need to have and must have is there is no smoking within the facility, and marijuana or byproducts of marijuana cannot be used in your facility. So no hemp or CBD oil, any of that, because it's a federal violation. Now, if that changes when the Supreme Court, because there is a case sitting on for them to review, that might change over time. But right now, marijuana is still against federal regulations. Okay. And then if you're going to have to do a rights restrictions, for instance, you have a person that lives in a facility and they are being asked to leave because the facility can no longer meet their needs. And they're not quite ready for long-term care. They don't quite meet that skilled care. And you're willing to take this on. Then we need to know right from the beginning, and we build that into their service plan. And we don't call it a rights restriction, but we say this is a special consideration. And so we're going to change the language, and I will be working on this in August and September, and I will be presenting on our YouTube channel. How do we do special considerations and behavioral management for those that we need to do that with? So if we have somebody that keeps violating and smoking in the house, which I run into all the time, we will not be able to keep that person because they're violating our fire and safety code, they're violating our federal laws, they're violating our state laws, and they cannot put it into their being that they have to smoke at the smoking area only. We can't take their cigarettes away. We can't dole out 2 cigarettes an hour. And just on a just because basis, we have to go through a whole process. So as this morphs out in the next few months, hopefully the process, we will have an ability to actually do a rights restriction when it's a safety issue and be able to successfully take care of people and not add to our homeless population. All right, so remember that we have regulations at many, many levels. I've talked about all of this. One of the ones I've recently ran into is residents refusing to participate in fire drills. It's not an option. We have to do it. Remember that you're obligated to 6 successful fire drills per year, 2 at night, 4 during the day. If they're unsuccessful, you have to hold a lot more until you meet that success. And that's not only everybody participating, being out in a timely manner that is for your building that would protect life. So it's an ordinance, and even the affordable housing, the condensed housing, apartment buildings and stuff run fire drills because they've got to understand how their people are going to react, and then who's at risk, and who who the fire department may have to go intervene on. So unless you're a brand new building with all the fire protections in place, where your area might be protected for 8 hours, and there is time to get everybody evacuated because there is egress that has been put in, or you've got a house that has a walkout basement and the egress has been approved. You need to know your local regulations, your fire department, and what's safe, and that you have the right liability insurance to cover you, so that in case you have a disaster, you don't lose everything in your life forever. And I can tell you over the last 10 years, we've had some pretty major scares in Colorado in our industry. All right, so let's talk about evictions. Evictions are twofold. One is for payment, but unfortunately, Senate Bill 22 took away our 10-day quit notice. I have asked for a ruling on this from the AG's office, and this violation of changing landlord-tenant agreements on the 10-day quit for non-payment. And then and they put in a whole bunch of things that they have 30 days and they can do an appeal. And if it's paid within 30 days, then you have to rescind the eviction. And like I said, we're going to have to get super smart and understand this thing better and have a really good mapping process. So things are changing on the whole eviction noise from COVID, both in the private sector and our industry. And so the 30-day eviction for behaviors can only be done by the owner, not for a hire administrator. And the owner has to take responsibility for this. And they're going to push this really hard. And this is especially going to impact owners that are not in our state. The ombudsmen have been given more permission to be involved in this, and they are very eager to be involved in this because they feel that residents frequently have their rights taken away and are evicted without due process. So like I said, this is going to be a very interesting and very contentious few months as we work through this. If you do not have a grievance form, I do have one that I borrowed from a friend in another state and her policy, and I can give it to you until we see if CDPAG is going to force a standardized grievance form, which is what I anticipate. So in conclusion, we made it through a lot of pandemic noise. We have found many of our staff have stayed resilient. Some of them have changed jobs to different companies, but they're still resilient. And some have stuck. I have met a lot of really good staff in the last 6 months across the state. Residents are more resilient than I ever thought they could be, and they're more realistic. And I think it comes from the generation that they are from, because they've been through it before, and yet their children or grandchildren, not so much. Okay, so we still have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do with our single entry point case managers. They have major caseloads. I talked to quite a few across the state. We have long conversations, and and they're good people trying to do the right thing, and they want to help, and they want people to have the right things in place. And so, and yet they working in corporate worlds, and they have to work under those corporate contingencies. Behavioral health got a ton of money this year from the legislators. Unfortunately, it will not last. So I'm hoping that the work we do will actually sustain. So one of the things our agency and a couple other agencies start planting seeds all over the place, that we were carving out all of our chronically mentally ill people, and we only wanted to care what was new and sexy, such as suds and meth and all that stuff. And yet we still have a huge contingency of chronically mentally ill folks in this state. And so interesting, on TV a couple of days ago, a county told their citizens of their county that all of the chronically mentally ill people needed to go back to Denver, that they had no interest in taking care of them, and they needed to leave their county. And so, like I said, it's out there, it's real, it impacts everybody, it impacts our whole state, it's impacting our nation. So we have a lot of work to do in this area. As we work through, getting caught up in all this stuff. So if you're got all this done, then check it off and say, yay, I'm done. If you don't, you may need some help. You may need to call, but you need a really good quality management audit and a quality plan, a QAPI plan. There's some things you can fix, and then you just monitor it. You're going to need to be prepared for anybody to come at your house at any time. It could be a focused survey. It could be that could trigger a full 2-3 day survey. A lot of the focus surveys come from complaints, and I can tell you the outside world is filing complaints left and right. If they feel that their loved ones' rights are being violated, they're not being cared for appropriately. So you need to get steady, steadfast, stay resilient, and be involved. And so I'm glad that you joined this conversation today. I am glad to continue to help be a conduit on this. So this is some of the stuff that I'm working on in the industry, and Eileen and I have changed up our teaching schedule, and we're working on whether, what to add to our 40-hour or what to change up so that we continue to be very modern and be one of the leading voices in the industry. So I will be taping the FAQ3, which was it is our resident agreements and service plans. And then we will start in late August or September. I'm going to start a series on pre-admissions and referrals. Protect your business and make sure you've got all the right documents. Most of the work that I'm doing, I'm seeing this is a pretty heavy deficit, that people are filling spaces or units for the money, and then they find that they're getting the wrong clients, or their social circle changes, and then they create new challenges and things that they could avoid if they just did a better job of figuring out what that community represents and who can they serve and who do they take care of well. So thank you for coming today. It was good seeing you all, and thank you, Lena, for helping me record this.